it's very different. Like, you know about it when you are cooked, and the longer the races go on, you do notice yourself, I suppose, struggling to concentrate. And with the sport we're in, where like qualifying at the moment between the top 10 is 0.2 of a second. So to make a little mistake, run a little bit wide or do something silly, lose yourself half a second, that's going to take you, 5-10 laps to try and make that up in a race. So it's really important to try and manage that heat as best as possible. And like you say, it's interesting, like when you say you're sitting in the sauna with the temp and stuff. I've started actually doing this sort of Sudoku and stuff like that, little games and stuff. I'm in the sauna just trying to get the brain moving, operating. And I feel like that helps. And it's actually a pretty cool thing to try and get the brain working when you are, I suppose, in that state of being quite warm and sweaty and a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, 100%. Danny Kahneman, I'm reading this book at the moment, Thinking Fast and Slow. I keep talking about it because it's like the thickest book on earth. I feel like I've been reading it for years, but he talks about the brain has these two systems. System 1, which is like automatic quick response, and then system 2, which is like problem solving. You know, someone says, what's 156 times 94? You really need to like use your brain. And the hotter we get, the harder that system 2 is to activate and to really actually like do that problem solving and think. And it just becomes more challenging because it requires more effort, but all the effort's going to surviving in 60 degrees or 55 degree heat. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, especially in a race situation. It's one of those things that you sort of get to the end of our races and you're cooked, you've been in there for an hour and a half, and you feel like my heart rate we're averaging between sort of 140 to 150, 155 the whole time we're in the car as well. And purely I think that's a lot to do with the heat. But you got guys coming at you on fresher tyres, and or you got to pass them, and you got to try and make these decisions to try and get those few more places up ahead. So the heat's it's crazy how it does affect the body, and it's actually been pretty cool with the sauna actually to experiment with a lot of that stuff, and try and get on top of it, and also give myself an edge over a lot of the other competitors in sport.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that a little more and see how you're kind of using the sauna to your benefit there. Are there other guys on the grid? I imagine there's a spectrum of people who don't focus as much on their fitness and perhaps do, or is it pretty kosher, like everyone's got a plan and a strategy to make sure that they're fit for these longer races?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more of a thing these days. I suppose people they put motorsport and fitness in two different categories. I don't think you probably need to really be too fit to drive a race car, but I suppose until you actually get in there and experience the G-forces and the heat and all that sort of stuff, it's you realise that the fitter you can be, the better it's gonna help you at the other end of it. And with the field being so close these days, the cars are getting more and more competitive. Every car up and down the field is a lot closer in comparison. So every edge we can get over our competitors now is definitely a massive benefit. So we try and, I suppose, there's everyone in there now take a lot more seriously. There's only 24 seats in the country. There's a lot of young guys coming in as well, trying to get everyone's seats and keep stepping up. So you just got to keep trying to do everything you can and leave no stone unturned.
Well, that was you a few years ago. You were one of the young guys coming up and causing havoc for all the older dudes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, got in there and it's good. At least we're still here now, so we've got to keep it going as long as possible, and hopefully these young whippersnappers don't come and take my seat.
No, I think they'd have some big shoes to fill. How do you go about then managing your fitness over those longer races, like over a Bathurst, where you could be in there for what do you say, like 90 minutes, 2 hours in the car, 60 degrees, because and maybe even talk a bit more about the concentration involved. I only know from my experience, I've got a friend with a pretty good quality racing simulator, and you go into like iRacing and you think, oh yeah, I'll just go with this like reasonably low power car. And it's hard, it's actually really hard. The concentration required is insane. Like you can't, it's like, don't talk to me. I'm trying.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So like, how do you kind of manage that, and maybe talk a little bit more about the concentration required over such a long period?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's quite hard for our sport. I suppose we're very different to, AFL and tennis, golf, stuff like that, where everyone can go out and train their profession every single day. For us, we're limited to 3 test days outside race meetings every year, and that's purely just a cost thing. So unfortunately for us, we don't get a whole lot of chance to practice our skills, so we try and find other things to try and keep us sharp, keep us going. As you mentioned, the simulator with iRacing, it's something that I only got the start of last year, and it's been a really good tool for me to use. It's even notice on that, like it's quite difficult to keep concentration on that, and it's actually probably the closest thing we can get in terms of trying to replicate our real race car. So we don't get the G-forces or anything like that, but the muscle memory side of things, the braking, the steering inputs, all those little bits and pieces that go into driving a race car is very similar on a simulator. And it probably even takes more concentration on the simulator because you don't have the G-forces to feel what the car's doing. You're sort of wobbling around, trying not to fall off the track, and look a little bit silly. But with that as well, I've got a go-kart. So that does I suppose that fills the other aspects of it, trying to speed the mind up and keep the brain going from a speed point of view, feel the G-forces and stuff like that. So go-karts, it's very different to drive to a normal race car, but in terms of trying to get that closest thing to actually traveling at speed and reflexes and stuff like that, it's probably the closest thing we can get to at the moment at a reasonable cost, really. So it's interesting. It's I suppose, while we do everything we can outside, away from the track, to try and make sure we're sharp come a race banding, because these days as well, with the way it is, they're trying to cut costs, make the sessions shorter, put less Ks on the cars. So when we get to a race banding, we do 2 half-an-hour practice sessions, and then we're into qualifying and racing. So not much time to blow the cobwebs out. So to try and keep the mind as sharp as possible before each race banding is pretty crucial for us.